I'm Reed, just a normal 27-year-old guy talking about building wealth and getting your life together in your 20s. If there is one thing I've noticed throughout my 20s, it is that so many people make this critical yet easy to avoid mistake, and it traps them in a system where they're unable to escape. Over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, unable to cover surprise expenses or break out of their predicament. So how does this happen? Once you get there, it is tough to escape. So how can we avoid this? Hey everyone, we're here, and I want everyone to not just survive, but thrive. And today on Where Wednesday, the show where you send me emails asking a question about life and I respond to them, we'll be discussing how we can thrive from a financial perspective in our 20s. So let's get right into it. Here is our question. Hello, this might be a pretty straightforward and obvious topic to anyone financially literate, but could you cover the importance of living below your means in your 20s, whether that be fresh out of college or just move somewhere, while also maintaining a solid standard of living and quality of life? Thanks, sent from my iPhone. Well, thank you, sent from my iPhone. And I think this is a super important topic to discuss, since the majority of my viewers are in their 20s, a lot of them in their early 20s, so I'm going to tell the story of my cheapness and how living below my means gave me a degree of financial freedom later in my 20s, enough to quit my job without another lined up. It is so important to be cheap when you're young, especially before you adopt major responsibilities like a house and, a partner and family and things like that. So first, I want to discuss why it might be a little tougher for our generation. It is no secret that our generation has some challenges that are unique to us. Student loans are nuts. The prices are through the roof in American university. Inflation is worse than it has been in decades, although it is come down a little bit, but especially 2 years ago we had historically high inflation. The job market's been a little bit brutal too for the last 2 years. So with this, it is no surprise that 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So let's go over some major expenses for your average American. First, we got a car payment between $525 for a used car and $734 for a new car, for housing, an average of about $1,700 for rent or $1,800 for mortgage. Discretionary spending, which is basically anything that goes beyond a need, and now it is a want. So things like travel, things like entertainment, things like buying clothing that is beyond your basic needs, things like that. So that is about $567 per month. In terms of these payments, they're pretty high. A car payment, I'll fight anyone to death on this. You don't need to be paying between $500 and $700 a month for a car. But the general picture here is that Americans are spending a lot of money here, like too much money. And once you settle down and have a family, your expenses skyrocket. So it is very important to pay attention to this, especially if you're before that point in your life. So I've been a cheapo most of my life. It just kind of comes natural to me. I have zero inclination to spend money excessively. It has given me so much freedom and so much of my life. And a lot of that is due to, and I'm going to say it, due to my decisions. Growing up in my 20s, I've seen so many people make dumb financial decisions. Buying a $50,000 car when you're 22, making your rent $3,000 to live in a cool place when you could easily be paying $1,500, buying fancy clothing. One of my friends spent $8,000 on a fancy new couch when mine I got from a garage sale for nothing other than the labor of moving it out of there. And a lot of people do spend on dumb and unnecessary things, and that is the key word, unnecessary. It is not needed. You can get the job done with much less. So I graduated college and lived pretty cheaply throughout college while working internships. And when I graduated, I was making a pretty good salary, about $75,000 a year, which is much more than I'd ever made in my life up to that point. So instead of balling out, which is what almost everyone did when they graduated and got that money, what did I do? Instead of getting a nice apartment, I continued living in my college town in a house with 6 people, and my rent was $500 a month. The first car I bought when I graduated was about $4,800, which I paid in cash. It was old. It had 100,000 miles on it, but it was well taken care of, and before that, each of my cars cost less than $1,000 because I just wanted a car. With hundreds of thousands of miles that got me from point A to point B, and because of that, I've never had a car payment, mostly ate at Qdoba and Chipotle, and whatever single-digit meals I could make, or get my hands on, and due to this, I was able to save and invest and save and invest. And then COVID hit, and I moved back in with my parents for a stint of about 2 years. And then earlier this year in 2024, I also spent another stint moving back in with my parents. Never had a car payment, and due to my living decisions, my rent payments have been minimal outside of 2 years. Living in the city of Milwaukee when my rent was $1,500. I was really only paying for the essentials, like, food, internet, gas and electric, and eventually travel. So let's do the math here. I was making good money as an engineer, as a software engineer, and living very cheaply with, I didn't have family, minimal rent, no car payment, basically just the necessities. This allowed me to save and invest tens of thousands of dollars per year throughout my 20s. And as the stock market boomed from 2019 to present day, this turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings and investments throughout my 20s. And I didn't do anything special. I just made a solid salary and I was a cheapo. It is doable now. Can I retire? No, absolutely not. Definitely not in America, at least. But can I take surprise expenses? Yes. Can I quit my job for like a year without worrying about money? At least right now. And yes, I can. And I did. Now I'm still a little bit stressed about money at times because, I no longer have a salary living on small paychecks from stock dividends and YouTube, but I am in a low cost of living country right now. So I'm fine for the time being, and this freedom was allowed because of the decisions I made in my 20s. Because of this lifestyle, it has given me peace and my peace of mind and freedom. And I prioritized experiences over things, and I never bought dumb stuff. So do I regret living like this? My first answer is hell no, sure. Maybe I missed out on some fun things, or maybe some people thought I was a loser because of how cheap or crappy my stuff was, or because I had holes in my socks, but I'm happy with how it turned out. Now, what should we be spending our money on? So I'll never say to anyone not to spend on something if it significantly increases your quality of life, your health, learning stuff like that. Things like a good mattress, good shoes, good glasses, a gym membership, healthier food, good insurance, cool books or courses to learn things. Stuff like that is great. You want to buy stuff that improves your life. Like, think of a mattress. If you have a terrible mattress, you're going to be angry the whole day because you slept bad. Like, that is something you want to make. It is a good investment. Same thing with like buying good shoes. You're comfortable, good glasses, because your eyes are important, stuff like that. I would also prioritize paying for experiences, not things like, you'll remember the adventures you went on. You'll remember visiting that one country or going on this trip with your buddies. You're not going to really care that you bought a car that was $50,000 instead of $20,000. Excessive spending seems to be very common on things like cars, rent, and that kind of stuff. So I would say, buy a safe, reliable used car with tens of thousands of miles. That is what I bought. But you do get a lot of repairs and stuff when it comes to those older cars. But just, don't go overboard. It'll be much cheaper if you buy a used car than a new car, and it'll do the job. In terms of rent, I'd recommend it is live with roommates early on as long as you get along with them and you live in a safe place. And don't go overboard if you don't need to. Some of my friends have gotten just out of control with their crazy high rent prices. Just because they made money, they thought they could spend it. Now, they have no savings. And they're the same age as me. And also, if you decide to buy a house, get a mortgage, it can be a bad investment if you overstretch yourself and don't set aside expenses for maintaining the house. Like, all that is on you. So a lot of people make the mistake of buying too much house and now it becomes this liability for them. As opposed to if you're not really sure where you're going or you don't really have the down payment to make on a house, you might want to just continue renting in the meantime in terms of discretionary spending. You do want to have fun, you want to buy cool things, but just don't go overboard. Like old iPhones still work for a while. You don't need a super crazy couch. You don't need designer clothing. Screw that stuff. A lot of this depends on what you make too. So obviously for the high earners listening to this, you have some leeway, like, just be smart with your money. Don't spend all of it. For the common man, it is possible to accumulate money just by being cheap. And I think I'm a living example of that. I've seen people who, you make $60,000 a year. You can save way more than someone making $200,000 a year if they're spending all of it. So for the people in their 20s with no kids or family, you're really in a unique position. Your dollars invested right now, especially if you're like, really early 20s are so powerful. $1 invested could become $22 when you account for investing in compound interest. So saving while you're young should be extremely high priority. And the tragedy is that most people don't realize this until it is too late. Also, once you have family and kids, if you weren't careful to that point, you kind of might be trapped in this cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Because your expenses are so high, you're providing for more than just yourself. A lot of my friends have kids, which is awesome and amazing, and I definitely want that in the next few years. It just elevates your responsibility and limits the risk you can take if you aren't in a position to save. You got to try your best to either cut back expenses, or if you can't do that in a healthy way, try to upskill. Learn something new, try to figure out something where you can make a little bit more money or maybe even a side hustle. Like YouTube, the best thing to do though is to avoid getting in that cycle in the first place. It is still possible to escape once you get there, but it is just much more difficult than preventing it in the first place. Here are some numbers that should scare you. Anything you spend just $19 per week on adds up to over $1,000 per year. So think of that Starbucks coffee you get, or maybe you have a fancy cocktail or a couple of beers on the weekend. That adds up, and imagine how much, if you could save thousands of dollars per year, how much that adds up over the long term. And here's another one. If you invest just $100 per month starting at age 22, by the time you're in your 60s, this adds up to $500,000. Now, if you bump this up to $200 per month, which is again, relatively small number to do, you have almost $1,000,000 if we just have the same stock market returns that we've always had. So, what seems like small numbers? And I can go into this on a more in-depth investing video, but what seems like a small amount of money over time adds up and compounds and just becomes huge after a while. So I don't know what your guilty pleasure is, but maybe think about cutting it out or reducing it. I mean, expensive coffees, alcohol, something bigger. Maybe you just don't need it. This emphasizes the importance of starting early, starting saving and investing when you're young, as opposed to waiting. Most people realize this when it is too late. You invest early and often from a young age, it can turn into some big-time numbers. Start as early as you can, and I can make more videos on investing. But the short answer is yes. It is super important to live below your means as long as you're healthy about it. You're not putting yourself in danger or your health in danger, but doing this has given me a degree of freedom, and it can for you as well. Just don't buy dumb stuff, don't buy, expensive coffees, too much alcohol, stuff like that. So there you have it for this episode of Wire and Wednesday. Do let me know what you think and send me any more emails with your questions. Been loving this show, hope I can do many more. And have a good rest of your day, everyone. Peace out.